James,
Raf.
I have a defense technology startup idea.
Mm-hmm.
I'll pitch you.
Please.
So you know SpaceX.
Yep.
What was the big idea there with SpaceX?
The big idea is that we should go into space.
Well, but I mean, from a business model perspective, what was the innovation, with his rockets?
Reusable rockets.
Okay, hear me out. Reusable bombs.
Okay.
So typically a bomb will
explode.
That's right.
That's it.
But what if 1,000 to 2,000 explosions
from one single unit?
Yeah, reusable bomb.
Reusable nuclear bomb.
Yeah. So you don't need to build 2,000 bombs that way. You just build one.
You just build the one.
Yeah.
And you just keep using it.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you retrieve it?
Oh, I mean, there's obviously some things we need to work out. We use agile methodology. The thing about innovation is it sounds like a stupid idea until someone goes and builds it.
Until someone does it, yeah, exactly. The history of innovation is just littered with people who were told no by the so-called adults in the room.
Exactly.
And people dared to dream.
That's
and right now you are daring to dream about a bomb that can explode 1,000 times.
We're going to move fast and break things, but not bombs.
That's great. Today, we're talking about a topic that has been on the list for a little while. We haven't gotten to it as yet. We've talked about it a little bit in little bits and pieces throughout. But it's a dark and evil topic. It's a dark and evil topic.
It's not.
Oh, sorry. There's a pen.
I just noticed a pen.
There's a pen sitting on the table that's speaking of dark and evil topics, which is OxyContin branded. It's literally just a pen with OxyContin and then oxycodone HCI controlled release tablets. That's pretty cool. That's pretty sick. Then a website, www.partnersagainstpain.com. Anyway, back on track. Dark and evil topic. We're talking about defense tech and sort of the relationship between the tech industry, Silicon Valley, and the military. Primarily the US military, but we're going to give it a bit of Australian flavour.
Yeah. And I'm going to do a bit of foreshadowing.
Please.
We're going to talk about the ghost shark.
The ghost shark.
That's
and before you ask, wait a minute, what is the ghost shark? That sounds epic. We're going to tell you. So the reason we want to talk about it is because there's this flurry of new startups that are kind of like venture-backed, invested in by Silicon Valley investors. And what they do is they make weapons. They make weapon systems and defense systems. Obviously, building weapons is not a new thing. From the moment a guy picked up a big heavy stick and said, that guy has something I want.
I mean, the first tool was a sharpened rock, was it not?
I don't know what they were
using that for.
I actually think the first tool was a laptop.
Because it depends on your definition of tool.
Yeah, but
it depends on your definition of laptop.
I was thinking of kind of like smooth rock with like an overhanging rock that sort of went up perpendicular to it.
Yeah.
And like you didn't have much to do as a caveman or whatever, so you just sort of fucked around on it, much the same way as we get on the computer and dick around.
That's right.
That's a laptop to me. I assume that happened. So yeah, there are all these new companies that are coming out which are aiming to disrupt the defense industry and bring tech industry and Silicon Valley thinking into defense, which you might find to be a dark and evil concept, but it's certainly happening. So yeah, we're going to talk about that. But before we get to like Anduril, which is the big company in the space, we have to go back. You have to go back in time.
Yeah.
We need to hear like the rewinding sound effect. We've talked about this on a few different episodes, but Silicon Valley and the American tech industry, as we kind of imagine it, in California, sort of began as essentially an outgrowth of the defense industry after World War II. A lot of the military contractors being based out there, and a lot of the early developments around like microprocessors were really put together to help with missile targeting, essentially. That was like the big goal. So a lot of the roots of the technologies we take for granted sort of came out of the defense industry. DARPA, which stands for Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, it's basically like the R&D arm of the US Department of Defense, has been around since the 1950s, and that funded a lot of this early work. But then something else happened in California in the 1960s.
Oh, yeah?
What do you reckon that was?
Lysergic Acid, folks.
That's right. Psychedelic drugs, the counterculture, and all of a sudden, coming out of that, you get Steve Jobs, a guy who was more interested in making cool laptops than big scary missiles.
Yeah.
And it's all been astray since then, folks.
Yeah, we need to get back to business.
So yeah, but basically, the face of the tech industry changed, became a consumer thing, and for a very long time, it became a big gauche to work on weapons of mass destruction.
Absolutely. I mean, Google's original, don't be evil and whatnot.
Yeah,
it's kind of like, we don't do that.
We don't do that.
Our products, Apple even say like, an Apple product will never kill someone. Which, what about the birth rates of Western civilization?
Apple products have definitely been used as an accessory to a murder.
Yeah, I mean, people checking their phone, I'm sure, have ploughed their car into like an oncoming family of,
Or people have organised a murder via their
That's right, the murder of Western democracy. When they stormed the Capitol on January 6th.
All organised on Apple products, folks.
Lady Liberty herself, dead.
Killed by an iPhone. Killed by iPad. Because let's be honest, the people who stormed the Capitol were probably coordinating on an iPad.
It's true.
From the nice big comfortable chair in their living room. Anyway, so that kind of stuff was going on.
But yeah, obviously, I mean, part of it, I guess, is California culture. Part of it, which like infused the... We've talked about this at length. Like, it was a hotbed for university-educated liberals who, as you say, found it a little gauche to be taking money from defense. And, because again, as we've talked about, you got to remember, people who are working at Google and Facebook literally thought they were doing a good thing. Connecting the world's information, this kind of stuff was like an honorable task, as opposed to just like, make one of the most efficient advertising products that's been known to man. Like they thought about it in grander terms.
Yep. Absolutely.
But that said, America spends nearly $1 trillion a year on defense. Like there's some juicy contracts out there.
There's juicy contracts under that $1 trillion for sure, and they spend it pretty flagrantly. There's the old, well, it's not even a joke, it's true, that the US DoD has never passed an audit, and there's always tens of billions of black hole money going somewhere.
Yeah.
And yes, a lot of that is potentially to insane deep state projects, but there's also a lot of, graft and waste and whatever. And one of the other reasons for that, because this is another important part of the puzzle of what we're going to talk about, is that over the years, since World War II, but especially since the Cold War, the Cold War, there was a whole lot of weapons and weapon systems and defense systems being bandied about and built, because, it was a bit of a dick-swinging contest with the Soviet Union. Mm-hmm. But after that, in the early 90s, and from then on, the US defense industry really sort of coalesced into what they call the five primes, or the big five. Five major defense companies. You probably know these names. Yeah. Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Northrop Grumman, Raytheon, and General Dynamics.
So are you reading my LinkedIn? My former employers.
Oh, wow. What were you doing at each of them?
Strategy. Bit of brand work. Bit of brand work in the case of Raytheon.
Brand manager. You were social lead at General Dynamics. And then the Boeing guy, you were internal comms.
Yeah, which is important. A large organization, just if you want your organization to work as one, what is brand? But every single touch point of an individual's engagement with an organization.
That's so true. You were the guy at Raytheon who was sending emails around like, hey guys, it's Graham's birthday today, so there'll be cupcakes in the kitchen. Make sure you get there from 10 or you won't get one.
It's Pride Week, and just to remind it, we're wearing odd socks. Odd Sock Wednesday.
Guys, we're sending around a virtual card for Glenda.
She's been working here at Raytheon for 28 years. So virtual round of applause for Gwenda, please. And if you could sign the card. Guys, Gwenda's card, you have got 8 hours to sign Gwenda's card. It's closing in 8 hours. There's only 3 signatures on it so far. If you could write a little note, that'd be fantastic. Gwenda has given a lot to Raytheon over the years.
That was you. So anyway, the five primes, or the big five, most of US defense contracting goes through those five companies. Yes, there are a bunch of other defense tech companies too, and defense suppliers, but most of it goes through those five. Part of it is, when it comes to, we want to build a
plane.
We want to build a stealth bomber that automatically eliminates most companies on Earth.
Yes. I've never applied for a tender, for example, for a stealth bomber.
Not once.
No.
No. You couldn't even fluff that one up on a tender submission. That's a shame. Bic pens. Could they make a bomber? So I am looking for the closest company I could see in front of me, and you are twiddling a pen around.
But I mean, even it's Bic pens and Oxycontin, like Purdue. I don't think either.
Purdue Pharma maybe could.
Do you reckon they could spin up a stealth bomber? Who knows what's going on there?
I think they did spin up something maximally more destructive.
That's very, very true. Hiding in plain sight.
Yep, true. So anyway, a lot of other defense companies actually do contracts as subcontractors to the big five. So the point being, there are two little things curdling in the background as we describe them. On the one side, the tech industry has been really squeamish about getting into defense on the one hand. On the other side, it's a very closed system where only a handful of big names are really getting these contracts and everyone else is sort of getting the smaller ones. And it's a gigantic market. We're talking trillions of dollars.
Yeah.
So these things are playing around the background. What little bridging sort of thing that's happened is basically big tech trying to get some bites of the apple there. So I'm talking about companies like Microsoft, like Amazon, like Google, wanting to get mostly big, like obviously none of them are thinking about building stealth bombers, but basically like doing things like who does the IT and cloud for the Pentagon.
Exactly.
Which has obviously massive needs in that regard. Microsoft and Amazon had like a tender sort of battle over who was going to supply the Pentagon's IT systems and cloud systems. It was called Project Jedi. Very cringe. It stands for Joint Enterprise Defense Infrastructure. They had a big battle over that because, obviously Microsoft is massively integrated into the US.
They're using
government.
Word and Excel, folks.
But if there is a deep state lizard Illuminati core that's secretly running the US government, they're using Teams.
Look, accusations have been made about Bill Gates in the past.
Well, exactly right. When there's these deep state operatives, the guys that assassinated JFK, the guys that did cocaine trafficking with the Contras, the guys who did 9/11, they all have per seat Office 365 subscriptions, and they're emailing on Outlook, and they've got
Sales Copilot.
They're using Microsoft's Copilot to make their job more efficient using generative AI.
That's right. Auto responding to emails, this kind of gear. Of course.
Anyway.
Confirmed. But yeah, I mean, Microsoft obviously partnered, A, because of, I guess, they're an early company, but B, as you say, like, the government has to use something.
Well, that exactly. In fact, Microsoft won that $10 billion Project Jedi contract. Amazon actually sued, saying they didn't get a fair look in. This is to show how competitive a lot of these massive contracts are, which delayed the rollout by quite some time. But anyway, Microsoft eventually won that.
That's because Amazon basically claiming that it was biased because Trump didn't like Bezos.
Yeah, that's right.
He had a thing against Bezos for a while. What was that about? I can't
remember.
remember.
But yeah, they did make the claim that Trump was biased against Bezos for just like billionaire things, I guess. This was back in 2019. I think Google was working with the DoD on something called Project Maven, which was essentially doing machine learning of drone footage. But Google, don't be evil, etc. The employees sort of ran riot about that. Google employees are more likely to arc up about this stuff than Microsoft ones, let's be honest.
Yes.
Totally different company culture, where obviously Microsoft is a bit more corporate. Anyway, so all this stuff is kind of percolating. You've got a small number of contractors working on US military stuff. You've got the tech industry sort of, yes, the big players are doing it, but there's still a lot of squeamishness around it. Two companies sort of like changed the game a little bit on this in terms of opening up the idea of tech companies contributing to this sort of landscape. One of them you already mentioned at the beginning of the episode, which is SpaceX, like being a private contractor getting into US aerospace things. And the other one was Palantir, who we've talked about a bit in the past. Palantir being Peter Thiel's big data company. I think last time we were trying to explain what does Palantir do, and the answer is kind of heaps of different stuff. Anything that's related to data like gigantic amounts of data and processing it and drawing insights from it.
Yeah.
Which realistically, that kind of means anything.
Yes, exactly.
Everything involves vast amounts of data now. So they basically come in and they solve thorny, weird problems for giant organizations and governments that are related to data, essentially.
Yeah.
But they got their hooks basically into like the Pentagon and the American defense establishment.
Yeah, they're one of these companies. Apparently, they only have like 22 customers or something like that.
Yeah.
If you look at them, because they're a public company, and, you can see their numbers, and which, yeah, I mean, look, with all of this stuff, you can kind of see if we do go back 10, 15 years or whatever, with Silicon Valley brain, or 10 years, say, you can see once again the problem statement. In order to, yes, build, say, a fighter jet, an F-16 or an F-32 or whatever, the government comes up with this whole plan, takes them years and years and years to develop basically the plan from start to finish. And like, here is the finished product that we want to be built. And then we, I guess, speak to Boeing or like there's, the very few companies in the world who can actually build one. And they fight out for the contract, if there's even a fight from, at that point.
Yep.
And 20 years later, a plane is delivered.
Yeah, totally. And because, the whole point, when it comes down to like the US government, like we need a fighter jet or we need whatever. I mean, the big boondoggle over the past little while was, without getting too deep into it, every branch of the US military wanted a plane. And there was a giant protracted boondoggle as they tried to figure out achieving all these goals. For like, the Marines wanted to do this, the Army wanted it to do this, the Air Force wanted to do this, and trying to put all of that into like one modular plane design. And then the output was like, oh, this plane can't fly in the rain.
Yeah.
Anyway, but the point is, and like that, it's a decades-long process of R&D and development with these small amounts of companies. We already know that companies like Boeing are going through their own sort of bizarre issues without even having to deal with this stuff. So it's a weird, like, clunky system.
Yeah, and, so you can see, with shitloads of money, obviously, being part of all of this. So Silicon Valley brain is like, what if we could build these weapons and apply for these defense contracts, but using software-like techniques where we move fast and we break things? That's right, folks. What if we used agile methodologies to build weapons? Got to be a better way. It's one of those. Like, there's got to be a better way than these insane things. What if we can? And as I said, the total addressable market is every single country's military budget,
or at least countries allied to the United States.
Well, yeah, exactly. Let's start with the $1 trillion that the American government is spending. So you can see the temptation there.
Oh yeah, like the problem set and the total addressable market, even though it's one customer, which makes it the dynamics kind of interesting, is very tempting. So you've got companies like SpaceX and Palantir that are kind of kicking the door open a bit for the government to work with these things. You have the changing vibe in Silicon Valley, vibe shift.
Well, they took the red pill.
Yeah, well, exactly. All these engineers woke up and go, actually, I'm a friggin' patriot. Which leads us to the company that we really wanted to talk about today, which is kind of like the most talked about of this new generation of companies. Anduril. Yep. From like Palantir, and it involved a lot of Palantir folks who came along to work on it.
Including the initial funder being Peter Thiel.
That's right. Anduril, is it Lord of the Rings?
I don't understand this.
Raf's shaking his head. Raf's shaking his damn head. Yeah, they're really into this shit. I mean, particularly, I think a lot of it. I think is Peter Thiel led.
Yeah,
because he also has Mithril Capital, which is like one of his one of his funds. He obviously really likes Lord of the Rings.
Is there some kind of like is there some kind of racial thing? Like, what's the deal? There's some metaphor here. Like, why are they so obsessed with Lord of the Rings about friggin' wizards and orcs and shit?
Yeah, I think it's like...
And hobbits.
It's a certain kind of like culture, which is kind of like locked in. I've tried to figure this out in the past as well, because it's not that Jeff Bezos is obsessed with Lord of the Rings.
Yeah,
we've seen it in the past where like he took the leading role or one of the leading roles in getting the rights to make a Lord of the Rings show on Amazon Prime because he personally loved Lord of the Rings. Tons of founders, especially from this kind of new-ish, like I said, ones who are a bit more right-wing builder types, fucking love Lord of the Rings. And there's something psychological going on there.
I don't think I want to know.
No, no. Well, I said this episode's going to feature lots of dark and evil material.
Yeah.
That's part of it. But anyway, Anduril was founded by kooky character by the name of Palmer Luckey.
Yeah, that name obviously sounds like a cigarette brand name.
I'm just picturing like the old-fashioned ad. It's like a beach and like cursive font in the blue sky. It's like Palmer Luckey. And there's like a guy lounging and smoking a cigarette.
Yeah. Yeah,
You
I
see
see
it?
it. Oh, absolutely.
That's not what he looks like.
No, he's probably one of the worst looking founders. He's known for, this is kind of like his Sam Bankman-Fried, you know, they all have a thing, Steve Jobs and the turtleneck. He wears Hawaiian shirts and flip-flops, as they call them stateside, and has the worst goatee of all time.
Yeah, totally.
Like that's his thing.
Yeah.
And if you're wondering, like, whoa, why would you make that your thing? I have exactly the same question. I guess it's certainly a brand. But so I guess it's worth exploring. So the guy is apparently, you know, was some wunderkind who his background is he invented the Oculus in his garage, in his parents' garage.
Yeah, that's right. He invented the Oculus Rift, which was, as you may know, it's now called the Meta Quest, or whatever. The Meta acquired Oculus a long time ago, but it was a relatively big leap forward for bringing VR technology to gamers, essentially. That was his first goal as a gamer himself, if it wasn't clear from the description we gave him. He actually invented that and sold it to Facebook for
$2 billion.
$2 billion. So he was in his 20s when that happened. Went to work for Facebook, got fired from Facebook under a dark cloud.
Yeah, undisclosed reasons. However, it had also come out like a couple of months earlier that he donated to some right-wing PAC or whatever.
Yeah,
that Facebook claims had nothing to do with it, blah, blah, blah. But, you know, people speculate that you're not allowed to be right-wing or whatever.
Yeah, totally. So he has that sort of like degree of persecution complex or whatever. He open Trump supporter, and part of that generation that I keep talking about of like new Silicon Valley builders who are like, we're patriots.
Yeah, we're based.
We're building for America. We're based.
Yeah,
we're based. We're not like these quinoa eating, sandal wearing. Well, I do wear sandals.
Yeah, I mean,
but in a based way.
Myself, yeah.
Well, he
I'm a
wears
Tiva wearer. He's not a Tiva wearer. Like, you know, I'm more of a Tiva and what's the brand? Not Osprey. The adventure wear brand.
Oh yeah.
The woke adventure. I actually don't own any of that stuff, but you know, you're a Birkenstock wearer, aren't you? You're more of that vibe.
Oh, that's right. I'm wearing them right now.
You're a Birkenstock guy. I'm a Tiva guy. He probably has some kind of based sandals.
There's got to be a based sandals brand out there that he's rocking. Anyway, so he left Facebook.
You can see why Peter Thiel would be attracted to this. He came up with the Anduril idea. Apparently, they were him and his boys were hanging out in his mansion eating Chick-fil-A. And one of his based friends said, you know, America should have a Stark Industries from Iron Man. And he was like, absolutely. I actually don't know exactly what that is. I assume it's what Anduril is. But like, absolutely, America should have it. And he went to Peter Thiel, and Peter Thiel said, you're absolutely right. Make it happen, Palmer Luckey.
Yeah. Well, you know, in short, can we make Iron Man real?
Yeah.
So yeah, obviously a slightly goofy beginning, but the goal of Anduril was let's disrupt the big five military contractors. Let's approach it with like a Silicon Valley venture-backed business, hyper growth, scrappy, you know, as you said, move fast, break stuff methodology, where we're constantly iterating and we're building for like the battlefield of tomorrow. Yeah. While these lumbering giants are building, I don't know, fighter jets and shit, we're going to be like doing drone war, and we're going to be doing like he did a tweet, terrible tweet, where he said, I basically want to make anime real. I want the like mechs from anime to be real. And that's what Anduril's going to do. The actual reality of what they're doing is a little bit less dramatic, but that's kind of where they come from. So anyway, they if you go to their website right now and you look at it, it looks like a kind of military themed Apple.com.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it doesn't feel like a traditional, stodgy old defense contractor. Like, they've got slick video. Their stuff looks like it's from a video game. And, like, the design is Tesla-y, right?
Yeah, it's very Tesla-y.
It's very Tesla-y, except for military applications. And they've basically launched into a whole bunch of different military contracts. And all their stuff is kind of unified by a software layer that's called Lattice OS. And basically what that is a sort of AI-enabled software platform that like brings together all their technology.
Yeah, this is this whole kind of battlefield of tomorrow thing.
Drone swarms and like integrated camera systems and like autonomous vehicles.
But everything's feeding back to this one kind of OS that's
Skynet brain type thing.
Yeah, Skynet brain thing that's using AI to make sense of it and make, dynamic decisions in like the rapidly evolving military landscape and what have you.
In short, it's a SaaS platform.
Yes.
For killing people.
Yeah, now it's kind of hard to get, because so many of their contracts and whatnot are tied up, and they are getting contracts. Not, they're not building the next stealth bomber or anything yet, but like they have seemingly done a bunch of kind of defense contracts. Apparently, their drones are possibly being used in Ukraine. But this is what I'm getting to. It's kind of hard to really get that much detail about what they're actually doing, despite the fact that they're very, very active in the press release space.
They're always releasing marketing on things that they're releasing or partnering on, or they'll release like a video of some like autonomous dune buggy or something, and they'll give it some fucked name.
Yeah,
like this is the Illuminator.
Yeah,
and like and then you'll get this slick footage of this dune buggy shot very cinematically, leaping over sand dunes and whatever. But it's hard to tell like. Is this actually being deployed somewhere, or are you just like...
So from what I can kind of tell, and as I said, like this is me just poking around and us just poking around. It's kind of hard to get full details. They have definitely deployed... I guess their first product was these camera systems for the US-Mexico border.
That's right.
Like the digital wall. They were, the contractor for the digital wall on the border, which identifies people. I mean, the first ones identified people up to 2.5 kilometers away and like informed...
but like border patrol,
like there's a person out there. I mean, they've been trying to do this forever on the US-Mexico border. I was reading an article about, they weren't specifically talking about these Anduril ones, but they've been trying this for decades, and like these things are constantly sending border patrol out to like arrest a cow or some shit like that, because it's a big space that they're trying to cover. It's hard to identify this and the other, but yeah, they certainly had have a contract for that, and they're apparently deploying ones that can look out for 12 kilometers now, which again though, so much of their stuff is like they've signed a contract and like reached an agreement about deploying these things, and it's kind of hard to tell whether they've actually done it or not. But yeah, they've certainly deployed these big, tall cameras.
Yeah, and if you look at their product line, they've got the cameras, like these border camera systems. There's been a bunch of reporting by like places like The Guardian about them being part of this sort of like US border enforcement regime with ICE and things like that. They have a whole bunch of different drone products. Again, who knows where they're actually been deployed, but there's been some reporting that suggests they're potentially being used in Ukraine, along with the 5 million other janky drone brands that are being used by both sides in that conflict. And because this is worth noticing, talking about as well. We're not going to get too insanely deep into like the politics of the Ukraine war. I mean, the floor is yours if you want to.
But you can listen to the All In podcast because
for that kind of stuff. But
there's a lot of very intelligent stuff. Like, basically, my opinion is
it withers in the face of David Sachs or whatever he's going.
Whatever David Sachs is saying, I agree with.
Beautiful, yeah. Obviously, America is supplying Ukraine, and part of that is like essentially testing these kind of next-gen battlefield solutions or whatever, which are normally like drone swarms and shit like that, for how they might work on, I don't know, in some potential future conflict. Anyway, that's just like the technological side of it. So that kind of stuff is going on. They have a partnership with the Australian Navy.
Yeah.
This is kind of like the thing that brings it home. There's like, they've set up a whole shop here, Anduril Australia. I think it might be actually their first international proper office.
This is to co-develop Ghost Shark, an autonomous submarine.
Yeah,
with like a stealth autonomous submarine
for basically monitoring the Australian maritime border.
And it does seem like a prototype has been made. I mean, in that there's like a sleek-looking metal cylinder thing with like a rounded nose. But once again, so this is like in partnership with the Australian military and a couple of other like military-adjacent weird little
funding bodies and shit like that. Yeah,
as well as like military science and research. It's kind of hard. I'm taking one step back. So Anduril started with the software side of things. They built this Lattice OS. Lattice OS was kind of the foundation, and everything stems off that. As you say, it's like a good kind of SaaS play. But and then they
like Canva.
But exactly, Canva started as basically yearbook software, and now you can get them to print off cards for you. birthday invitations, this kind of thing. They moved into hardware from software to hardware.
Maybe Anduril can get to that level at some point.
The point being, the hardware kind of came afterwards because, hardware is way more expensive. They needed more funding and also just whatever, sure. That, the model is Lattice OS and then you add on real things.
And that locks you into the core platform.
Yeah. And, in order to achieve that, they've been on an acquisition spree buying drone manufacturers and...
rocket propulsion. Yeah, there's like an announcement every other week that Anduril's acquired one of these other tiny...
And they even acquired an autonomous submarine business as well. So yeah, I think to achieve that dream of like the hardware side, they're doing a lot of acquisitions. Fair enough, makes sense. But what it kind of gets back to me, like reading all these press releases about Ghost Shark and these various things, is like I'm not 100% sure exactly what Anduril's role in the building of the Ghost Shark is. Which, for the record, once Ghost Shark has been built, we own that. The Australian military owns that, and the plan is to sell it to other militaries. It'll be like our, as part of our military industrial complex. We've got to. I think Malcolm Turnbull made this a big priority. It was like, we got to start shipping fucking defense stuff. Great, but to me, reading the press releases and stuff, it kind of appears like Anduril's real role in this is basically they manage the JIRA. I mean, I'm probably understating things a little bit, but the big shining light of Ghost Shark is it's supposed to take 3 years. It's going to take 3 years to make. And yeah, there's a government body that has been set up to make sure that Australian military doesn't get left behind. Bring in private-public partnerships, this, that, and the other. And they brought in Anduril to make sure that we can make this Ghost Shark in 3 years. They're on time. We're 1 year in. They're on budget. They're ahead of schedule. But yeah, it does kind of seem like it's like all of the scientists are from this Australian R&D and Anduril is just like ensuring that we're doing our 2 week sprints, which good for them.
That's the Silicon Valley expertise.
Yeah.
Have you finished your ticket? You got to move it into the column, mate.
Yeah.
If you don't move it into QA, no one's going to be able to review it, and we won't be able to move it to complete it. Just one ticket. It's like Ghost Shark.
The Ghost Shark is in progress.
Imagine Ghost Shark is just in progress and gets allocated to you. And you leave a comment, you're like, sorry, it's not my area. And you kick it along. Sorry, that's Raf. Raf's the Ghost Shark guy.
Yeah, I'd bump it back. Exactly. But I'm sure they play, given that they bought an autonomous submarine thing, maybe they're playing a bigger role than just that. But it really does seem like their core competency is like, we will make you build things quickly.
Project management and like the software layer and all that sort of shit. Yeah. Because there's a lot of software engineers there. Yeah.
And like going back to like what have they shipped? So yeah, at the moment it doesn't feel like much. A lot of this stuff is very much like they've entered seemingly like R&D type contracts like this one, forward-looking contracts with various governments and government agencies to kind of think about things. And I'm perhaps develop product. Point being, I'm a little sus at the moment. Like, there's a lot of hype around this company, and there's a lot of like, this is the way to do things now. Like, they are killing it. And I don't know. It's very hard to. It's literally hard to find out like what have they built, like what have they shipped, other than the cameras on a tall pole.
Yeah. Well, yeah, It is kind of interesting because they have received a lot of hype, and if every time you look on, sites like Hacker News or you look on like Twitter or whatever, Anduril is one of the companies they hold up as kind of like, this is a company that's building shit, and they're patriotic, and they realize that the world environment has become dangerous and unstable. We're hurtling towards war with China, and we need to have drone swarms. We need to have all that sort of shit. And they get it, and all these pussies working on advertising at fucking Meta, and they're doing their bloody DEI initiatives. They don't get that at the coalface, there are guys that are making the fucking Ghost Shark. And that's kind of what the discourse is. Even putting aside like whatever you might think about companies building,
shit to kill people,
which I remind you is what this whole fucking conversation is about. But aside from that layer, it's kind of like, I don't know. Again, if you go to Hacker News, this is really funny. This is part of my research. You can always find interesting stuff on Hacker News. If you don't know what Hacker News is, it's like a forum for people in the software and venture capital industry to argue endlessly about shit. But it's always interesting because you normally get a bit of a temperature check on what the general vibe is and how people at big tech and in startups are thinking about stuff. And as with a lot of arguments, there are people who post under throwaways claiming that they work for company X or company Y. And you never know whether any of this stuff is true, obviously. But there was a very long, very funny thread where two people who claimed to be from like dueling departments within Anduril were arguing about how good the company is. And one, the anti-side is kind of reflected a bit in some like Glassdoor reviews and shit like that, where it was basically like, this company is chaotic, shambolic. We build lots of like kind of cool looking cheap shit that fails. And I don't think we're really building anything enduring here. And the other guy was like, that's how military contracting works, buddy. You build a lot of cheap shit that fails, and then 5, 10, 15 years later, you've got something sick. But
and he's like, that might be your department, but don't speak on behalf of my department, pal.
We're killing it over here. It's all from companies from accounts called like Throwaway 51115. I'm going to read a Hacker News comment because it made me laugh. This was on just a random thread about Anduril. Quoting someone who said, I think their biggest differentiator is the way they sell their products. You know, they have a more aggressive sort of like, you know, again, Silicon Valley style way of selling
this is
stuff.
a lot of the Glassdoor stuff as well. It's like marketing very good, but at the moment the products don't fucking work. But you know,
but the marketing is interesting. As I said, looks like sleek, Tesla, Apple, but
and me talking about like I don't know what they've built. Like if you go to their website, there's like 15 different products on there.
Yeah, but you just don't
know if they're
it's impossible
real.
to know at like what stage of development there are. Have they come out? Are they being used somewhere? Anyway, this was the guy was commenting. That guy saying the biggest differentiator is how they sell their product. This guy, absolute weapon. They still sell their products in the same way the other contractors do. Specifically, you have to flash a badge to even get in the door. Civilians, if they have the resources, should be able to procure these systems and vehicles if they so choose. I'd much rather protect my property perimeter with one of their lattice systems than with the hodgepodge array of cameras and PIR sensors I use now. I'd love to play with an Altius out in the desert as one of their vehicles, even if I'm limited to civilian munitions. But they won't even talk to you unless you're a pig, a Fed, or a glowy.
What I particularly like about that is they won't even talk like that. That's speaking from experience.
He's tried to knock on the door.
He's been hitting the contact us with like, can I purchase?
He's been trying to open the door without a badge. And they're like, sorry, mate, do you work here? Let me buy one of your guns.
I'll use civilian munitions.
Only civilian munitions. Please give me your autonomous dune buggy. But yeah, it is kind of interesting. And again, it sort of goes to... It's a funny conflict between a lot of these companies who have very, very public-facing marketing. And it's not just Anduril. There are other ones that are kind of in this space. There's like Shield AI, like Rebellion Defense, Primer, who work on like LLMs and natural language processing for intelligence analysis. There's a whole bunch of these companies that are popping up. They always have very, very... Like any company that's sort of venture-funded... It's this weird conflict where it's like, you know, Boeing, Raytheon, etc. These companies don't really need to advertise themselves because they have a very small list of clients and customers.
Yeah, most of their advertising is recruitment.
Yeah, advertising recruitment. Yeah. Like they'll put out and be like, it's Pride Week at Raytheon or whatever, to show that they're sort of hip and with it, even as they build, you know, munitions. But it's kind of funny that this new generation, because they are venture-backed companies that want to raise money, they go through funding rounds, they do the recruitment side of it, but I know they have to project this image that's right in your face. This Palmer Luckey goes on podcasts all the time. He publishes essays about like this dark, dangerous new age we're in.
Yeah.
Of like great power conflict with China, and you're just like, oh, we're going through the same like Cold War dick swinging contest.
Yeah.
Dick measuring contest, I think is the turn of phrase.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a dick swinging contest.
Well, yeah, I mean, so much of it comes back to the funding aspect of it, right? Like, he needs to, in order, like, it's losing shitloads of money, obviously. In order to stay alive, it needs to keep having venture funding, and in order to do that, like, and I guess the other thing is, because they are untested, if they are trying to win these contracts, and a lot of the contracts I see them post their press releases about are not particularly big, like they're kind of $30 million contracts for some state police force or whatever it is. But yeah, like I guess But so much of it comes back to the funding thing, as you say. Like they need to be raising bigger and bigger funding rounds, and when you're losing that much money, you have to sell the dream. It's about the narrative once again, which means that you have to have a really sleek website and be getting in the press all the time and present this like, wow, I got to get in.
Yeah,
on this like epic, awesome, based, amazing, genius founder.
And like the other side of it
Hawaiian
is,
shirt.
you know, it's a relatively sized company. It's like 2,500 employees,
Yeah.
right? And like, you know, some of them are going to be on the software and some the hardware side, whatever, and marketing, obviously, given they do market so aggressively. But it's also kind of like, I was thinking about, okay, they do a bunch of drone shit, and you know they're scrappy and nimble, blah blah blah. Are they making better drones than like DJI, like the Chinese company, the undisputed war leader in drones, which we talked about? Yes, they claim they don't work on military applications, and DJI had like a big PR disaster when it turned out that DJI drones were being used extensively in Ukraine on both sides of the conflict, and they had to go through this whole process of trying to disable their drones from being used there, and then they still kind of are. I don't know, it's very complex. But it's like, it sounds like, this is me coming from a relative amateur's perspective. I'm not a glowy, I'm not a Fed, I'm not a pig. You may disagree, I don't know. But it's also like, people seem to suggest, looking at this stuff, that China does not have companies like the big five primes. They don't have these giant effective companies, but they have a ton of like smaller, nimbler DJI type businesses. And it's like, is that who Enderall's competing with? Like that weird picking up the scraps, maybe giving the US Department of Defense a different contractor to work with so they can get better prices from Boeing. Does Anduril actually expect to be the size of like Raytheon, or do they want to get acquired by someone?
Yeah.
It's just a very weird time looking at these businesses and being like, what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah,
Are you just doing cool Tony Stark Iron Man branding as you like?
It feels like it's a software play at the end of the day, right? I know that, yes, they are building product, and that's kind of the big sell is like, we're hardware, we're making things.
Yeah,
but,
exactly.
like,
American dynamism, baby.
But it seems like, okay, yeah, sure, like one thing that General Dynamics or whatever might not be as good at is the software side of things, and like that's what Silicon Valley can do. Yeah. Get the guys who would be working on ad algorithms to, I don't know. All of this shit is just, it's so dark when you step, the AI battlefield of the future. You already hear dark shit coming out of what's happening in the Middle East with, you know, Project Lavender and all this kind of crap. But,
yeah, totally, exactly. Like, and there's tons of Israeli firms that work on some like pretty demented AI shit.
Yeah, and like even, you know, and obviously Anduril have like publicly about like, oh yeah, we can use our cameras to just detect who's a smuggler and who's not a smuggler on the border, you know, using AI, and it'll only get smarter over time, blah blah blah. And it's just like, this all sounds fucked.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, we talk about AI being like a nice little buzzword to use for all sorts of, I mean, it's on the consumer side, it's already a pretty diluted word that can refer to any amount of fucking things.
Yeah.
Like, is it LLMs, or is it like the most basic sort of machine learning stuff that devices in your house and software that you use every day uses? Or all the way up to like, when we say AI, we mean a super intelligence that's smarter than everybody at every given task.
Yeah.
And then, but when you think about it, yeah, again, on the war side, where there's that real propaganda use where it's like, we're using AI to detect combatants.
Yeah.
And again, there's a lot of this stuff coming. There was a big news story, which I'll drop in the comments, about the Israeli contractor being like, we're using it to identify Hamas commandants. And it's like, are you really?
Yeah. And like the optimal places to bomb. Like, obviously that shit is just incredibly dark, given that, as we know, AI is probabilistic. I know the counter argument is like, but humans make mistakes as well, and so if it's better than humans, isn't that good? What about this? We all put down our guns and we walk up to each other and we look each other in the eyes, give each other a hug, and say, I love you, fellow man. Yep. What about that?
Put the flower into the gun barrel.
Yeah, that's innovation.
That's the real peace. How about that?
Yeah.
If there's no war, more time to look at ads.
Yeah. Imagine that. If you're listening to this, did you know there's another world out there where you get a second episode of Down Round a week?
Yep, it's called Down Round Premium.
That's right, and there's no interruptions.
No interruptions, no ads, 2 episodes a week, including the free one you're getting right now, plus another one.
Yeah, $7 a month, not a week, a month. Downround.net. Downround.net. Instant access to the whole back catalogue as well. You've got so much to catch up on.
There's so much. Get around it.